Good afternoon. Good afternoon, people. How are we doing? Hope you're enjoying the week so far. It's not as great as weather as it was before, but here in sunny Essex, it's not too bad. So this week of wisdom, day 4. I'm delighted to be sharing the stage with somebody who I massively admire, respect for what he does. His name is Dan Coachafer. He is an absolute legend. In my opinion, he's created his own path, which is very different from a lot of people in the industry. And he essentially has built up a massive portfolio of buy-to-let properties in a relatively short space for somebody of his age. And essentially, I think that he's really done well in creating that path and gone completely in his own direction. And essentially, I think that he will be giving some real pearls of wisdom to people and shining some light on whether or not buy-to-let really is a dead strategy or something which people should be looking at. So I'm going to try and add him now into the equation. On the live. Now being added to this live, and we can actually start talking to him. How you doing, Dan? Do you want to turn your camera around?
Yeah. Just give me 1 second. Let's try that.
Brilliant stuff. First and foremost, how are you doing?
Yeah, really good, thanks. And you?
Yeah, staying well. To be honest, it's weird because the property world at the moment, it seems to be a bit stuck. Everybody seems to be sitting at home, looking at stuff and not really doing things. But I've literally just come off the phone from making an offer on a house. And I think that you've probably done the same yesterday or something happened with you. So,
Well, I had solicitor on the phone this morning give me the good news that property number 15 has just completed as of this morning. So, yeah, I think
15?
15, yes.
Wow, 15 properties. I mean, to be honest, I think we'll get to that at the end. It'd be interesting just to see whether or not you want to, how far you need to go to sort of to stop really, because 15 properties. I mean, a lot of people would dream of having 15 properties in their lifetime. But maybe first and foremost, obviously I know you very well, and you're somebody that I really admire as a person, not just as a property investor. But do you want to give the people a bit of a flavour of who you are and how you got into property?
Yeah, so I'm one of those accidental landlords out there. Actually, I was lucky enough to have a property fall on my lap. So I was over traveling the world in Australia doing what young men often do. And,
Yeah.
grandparents sort of passed away, unfortunately, but left me with a 3-bed buy-to-let property just on the outskirts of Nottingham. So certainly couldn't complain at that. Didn't have any idea what to do with it, but my parents sort of helped me out, giving it over to a letting agent, and then I rapidly discovered really what passive income was. I was living the dream over in Australia, traveling the world, and had this money just falling into my bank account, really.
Nice.
So yeah, it was, yeah, and that's where I sort of started, and it's sort of grown from there, really. That was, like I say, about 13 or so years ago. I've worked on my own education, getting my knowledge up there to look into the buy-to-let side of things, and built a portfolio up to 14 properties that are currently let, and one that I'm waiting for the keys to be posted through to me.
Nice. So when did you get your first property? How old were you?
I will have been, late 20s, 27 or so, 28.
Okay. So, and was that first property, was that pretty hard to get? Did you have to sort of get mum or dad involved, or did you do it all on your own?
No, so if the second property, almost after the inherited one, I actually went to trying to apply for a mortgage, trying to get a mortgage, and couldn't because they classed me as not having a job at the time, which I didn't really. I was travelling around working in bars, hostels, etc., and travelling the world. So they were quite rightly so. I wasn't employed. I didn't have that job you need to get that lending and that funding. So my mum actually helped me out with getting a home improvements loan on her own house for a garage extension.
Yeah.
That has still to this day not happened. that money came over to me. I used it to buy a buy-to-let property, and then subsequently paid her back to be able to pay off that loan. So yeah, that was the first hurdle that I needed to kind of get over, really.
Okay, I'll take it back that you're a good guy then.
Oh, yeah.
But in terms of like buy to let, I mean, look, everybody out there at the moment is teaching all of these sexy strategies, you know, the cash flowing strategies, because people are struggling to get the deposits together for taking on bigger for properties in general. So I think with all of this stuff that's going on, I mean, how much is a buy to let these days a bit of a dead strategy? Because people are looking for bigger returns, they're looking for money now. Why is buy to let for you the best strategy out there? Why?
Um, I would say that it's, yeah, you're rightly pointing, kind of pointing out there that it is a bit of a vanilla strategy. It's not exciting, it's not sexy in any way at all. And what comes with that unexcitement and maybe that unsexability is the fact that actually it's nice and passive, which a lot of these other sexy strategies, that everybody wants to get into, these quick win schemes, these, get rich overnight, they come with a lot of hassle, effort, energy, a lot of risk. Whereas a buy-to-let property, it can be a very passive investment, which, yes, of course, it does take time to set it up. You do need to know what you're doing. You do need to get it right. But once it is set up, in effect, you can almost forget about it, really, and just watch that passive income flowing in.
So you've mentioned passive, the fact that it's a passive strategy compared to everything else that you've seen out there. What other things would you say is the key for you? Is it the solidity of the deals? Is it the fact that it's kind of, just a very simple strategy? Or what do you like about it?
I love the acquiring side of it, and I love the searching for a new deal, and a new portfolio, a new property to add to the portfolio. But if I'm completely honest, Gwen, I don't need another day job. I don't want to be actively managing properties. That isn't where my passion lies at all. So that's where I rely on experts around me. I've systemized my business that once I've acquired a property, and I do go into my properties and turn them around and get them to a very good standard before I then sort of funnel them in to being, with my letting agent and with the rest of my team. But like I say, that doesn't interest me in the slightest at all. It's more that the excitement of finding that good, solid, safe investment property that I can kind of rack and stack, that I know will give me a great return for years to come, and also have that strong possibility of some capital appreciation, which really ultimately is where the long-term wealth is made.
So essentially, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into this because I'm trying to picture who's the best person for a buy-to-let strategy. So if you were characterising who that person would be, is it somebody that's got a job, that doesn't really want another job, that's got a bit of cash in the bank and just wants to, sort of be a steady Eddie and get, sort of properties at a decent rate and get some money in the bank and get some sort of cash flow and get paying off the mortgage? What type of person do you think, is that the type of person we're looking at, or is it?
Yeah, I would agree with that. The profile that mostly sort of come to me over at New to Property is your very level-headed investor, the investor that doesn't want to push the boundaries of potentially strategies that are slightly more risky. They want to get themselves, a solid, safe investment property. And a lot of people have got money tucked away in the bank, but they're also not looking for another job. People want to invest in something that's better than the bank, which is pretty much anything, really, as we know. But putting it into something that might give them a little bit of interest, but they don't want a headache that comes with that as well.
Okay, I mean, that's fair enough. So, look, there are going to be people here that maybe they're interested in the buy-to-let strategy, but obviously they're kind of being turned to the dark side and looking at other things as well, because if you've got a cash pot of, say, 30, 40 grand, they'll probably say to you, you can get 4 HMO, rent-to-HMO deals or SA deals or something like that. As you're somebody that is probably trying to bring more people into the buy-to-let world, what would you say to them in terms of, well, what things they would need to know in terms of taking on properties? What sort of 3 key things would you say? If I'm looking at buy-to-lets, what do they need to know, and what's the sexy thing about that for them?
I'm not sure if we'll ever class buy-to-let as sexy, Gwen, but we can certainly try. I would.
Dress it up. We'll dress it up.
I would say the first thing that I would always warn new investors about the sort of buy to let scene is that everything you hear isn't always accurate, and buy to let can be made very sexy by some. You know, there's some weird and wonderful, wild courses out there that sound absolutely fantastic. There's some great deals that land on my desk that look absolutely fantastic until you sort of dig into it. So I would say number one is don't trust everything that's said. Don't get me wrong, this strategy absolutely can work, and it does work very, very well if you know what you're doing. But just don't believe all the hype maybe that's out there or everything that's said. I would say have a clear goal and a clear strategy. You know, you mentioned there about SAs and you mentioned HMOs. The first chapter we almost cover, well, we do cover it new to property with every new client that we take on, is exactly what it is that you're looking to get out of investing in property. What's your actual goal? You know, if you don't have a destination to travel to, how will you ever know that you've actually got there? And then once you've got that destination, if you don't have a sat nav or a roadmap or a strategy to help you actually get there, the chances are you're probably going to go down the wrong road. You're probably going to keep veering off the wrong track, doing wrong things and getting sidetracked by, you know, weird and wonderful things such as SA and HMO that are actually, in my eyes, maybe more of a day job. Well, they are more of a day job on comparison to your vanilla buy-to-let.
Well, I guess all roads lead to buy-to-let to a certain degree, because once you started with SAs and cash flow and HMOs and the rest of it, it'll eventually go to buy-to-let at some stage once you built up a big enough cash flow. And I guess that's my next question is, how have you done it? Because obviously 15 buy-to-let, well 14, potentially 15 now, buy-to-let properties, you know, for most people that's kind of out of the question. It doesn't seem real. How do you get 15 properties? I speak to my mum and dad and they don't even know how to refurb their house without getting some additional money in the pockets. So how have you done that, and how have you built up such an amount of properties over that period of time?
Yeah, so I won the lottery, Gwen. I wish I could tell you that. I really do, but unfortunately I can't. So the answer, the answer I would, the answer I
No,
would
can you
give,
hear me?
yes, got you now.
Okay. Shall I repeat the question just so that people can hear? So essentially, what I was saying was that if you want to sort of acquire so many, you know, buy-to-let properties, for most people it's unreal. It seems like it's not really possible. So how have you done it? How have you managed to keep recycling the cash, or have you just basically worked harder at your own day job to get additional funds to fund it? Because the average person, you know, if they're earning 30, 40, 50,000 pounds kind of a year, they won't see how they can actually get together a deposit to be able to take on more properties. So how have you done it?
And yeah, I mean, and I was in that boat, you know, 13 odd years ago, thinking that, you know, I can maybe get one or two properties, but I'll never see a sizable portfolio, you know, in front of me if I just sort of carry on doing what I'm doing. But the truth of the matter is if you can set up these safe, solid investments that are always going to bring in a decent return. Now, that might not be a massive return, but a decent, steady return.
Yeah.
That snowball effect does start to pick up speed. The more properties that you add in, the more money, you know, the more revenue that you're generating, and the easier it then becomes. Now, what I've also focused on as well is picking areas that are not, or picking properties that are not, let's say, massively great on the yield. So I'm not going for a cash flow on a monthly basis. I'm looking for that cash flow, but I'm also looking for areas where there's going to be capital appreciation. So by doing a mixture of some work to add value to a property, having it in an area where you're going to see some appreciation, that allows me then to release some of that fund to put it back into the pot to purchase another property, which will increase the speed of that snowball, really.
So what you're saying is take a property which needs a bit of a refurb, add some value, make sure it's in a good rental area, and the more you take on of those, the more it will kind of build up a bigger pot for you to buy the next property.
That's right, and then if combined with, I'm a big fan of. If you guys watching haven't read The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, small significant actions on a daily basis done over a period of time will create large or significant results. So 13 years of compounding, saving a bit here and there, doing a bit of work, adding a bit of value there, here and there, making sure the properties are in the right area. The snowball soon picks up speed, and all of a sudden you get to one day where you think, wow, I've got 15 properties. How did that happen?
Dan, do you know what? I think we found the sexy part of buy to let.
Oh yeah.
because this is the point, is that when the snowball effect actually starts to happen, that's when you can start to really get traction and scale. Because if you're thinking about it, if you're starting now as a newbie, you take on one property, you're going to have to wait maybe 1, 2 or 3 years to be able to take on the next property and the next property. So I guess the key for newbies now is the patience at the start, to be able to say, look, keep with it, stick with it for a couple of years, 3 years, and then once you've got 3, 4, and 5, you can then start to leverage off of the others to create that extra deposit or value to be able to essentially get the next units on board. Is that how you see it, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would, this almost going back to, don't listen to what everybody says, or, don't listen to everybody out there, in the fact that, please, don't give up your day jobs just yet. You need your those day jobs for the next 5 years or so, to be collecting, to be building that fund to help that snowball start rolling. But once it does start rolling, once you get a sizable portfolio, you'd be surprised. Like I say, as long as these properties are in a decent area and they're bringing in a steady income on a monthly basis, and you can refinance to take some of that deposit out, it soon adds up, it soon builds up, and it soon allows you to move at speed.
So when you say steady income, obviously with COVID-19, that's affected a lot of businesses, not only in the property industry. So the question is, how has that affected you? Obviously with 14 properties, have you seen any effect personally on that scale? Because obviously with any scale, you're going to have sizable kind of losses if it is impacted. So how have you dealt with that? Have you had any impacts at all, or around it?
In short, no, touch wood at the moment. I would potentially put it down to the fact that I pick properties in good areas, so I don't go for the very, very cheap areas, which means my tenants tend to be decent tenants with decent jobs out there. So of course, people will be furloughed, but I haven't yet, as such, like I say, touch wood, had anybody void on one payment of the rent, or even ask for a bit of a holiday on their mortgage. Now, I do have funds. And on each of my properties, I do collect, I do sort of siphon off the top 10% of the rent on a monthly basis from all properties across the portfolio, that builds a pot of fund in case anything does happen, such as this. So I would be able to cover that mortgage and the payments, that anything that came in if I needed to. But as I say, at the moment, everything's pretty smooth. Everything's doing okay.
One thing actually you just highlighted was about financial discipline. And loads of people will talk about how much money you can make and everything else, but when the shit hits the fan, you need to have that buffer in place to be able to cover the costs of any loss of revenue in that. And not a lot of the trainers talk about that. And I think that's a really important thing as a manager, or as an entrepreneur or property investor, is that you always have to put something aside for a rainy day. And I think that's one thing which probably will be valuable for people watching, is that even when in the good times, you probably need to put something to the side just in case COVID-19 or whatever, tenants leaving. Because as much as an Excel spreadsheets, things look good, when reality hits in and it hits your pocket, that's the time when you need to have that in place and you need to have that cash ready. So I think that's a really valuable lesson for people.
Yeah, and I think it's easy enough to build that into your numbers as well. That money is never seen by me. That's never factored into my numbers. That's not part of the snowball. That's just siphoned off and put in a COVID-19 pot that will never ever happen to us.
In the missus's cash fund for new stuff. Yeah, but I mean, I guess that's pretty impressive to see that you've not really had any effect. Do you think that is luck, or do you think that is because of how you've selected your properties?
I
or a
think
bit
it's
of both?
both. I think I think it's possibly a little bit of both, maybe. We will see. Time will tell. I've checked in with my agent, my letting agent that manages all of my properties, and I just checked on what careers, what jobs it is that my tenants have got, just to see if potentially they will be working, they will be furloughed, just to give me a bit of an idea what might be coming. Across all of the properties, one of the tenants is still going to, one out of the two is still going to work, so that's pretty good on that front. So it's not a massive risk, but I would, in answer to the question, really, I think it's because of the property type that I choose and the areas that they are and the tenants that are housed within my properties.
So success basically is selecting a good area, selecting tenants, potential people that would be in those properties that would have a certain credibility from a status of employment, jobs, etc., and making sure that you're not essentially dealing with vermin. And I'm joking.
In a
But
word. But I think that's a really important piece there that you just mentioned, Gwyn, is the fact that, most of these deals that are out there, or newbie investors, they look at the numbers. So, they're looking for that 20% below market value, and they're looking for that, 20% ROI. And this is all great and it's all good. But there's another 50% to the deal that often these trainings out there, or that it's not mentioned. And that's the actual property itself, the specification of that property, the location of that property. Have you got the fundamentals, around that property? And is it going to actually attract the tenant pool that you're looking to attract? Because if you get that slightly wrong, it doesn't matter how good your deal is. It doesn't matter how much under market value it is or what ROI it's going to bring. If it doesn't attract the right tenants, then it's no use to anybody.
And don't you have some sort of like a checklist of items that you have to look at before you take it on as an investment? It's like the 15-point rule or something, isn't it?
Yeah, so I work off the perfect property. So we've got the perfect property, which is the property spec, the perfect location, the perfect price, and basically tick all the way down. If it doesn't tick, it just gets thrown out.
Okay, so you cover locations as train stations, transport access,
local schools, local employers. Yeah, that's it.
So, and that's also part of the due diligence, because a lot of investors, they will look at numbers and they'll be given the highlights. But I think that, as an investor, if you're looking at this longer term, and you're looking at things, and you know exactly what you're looking for because you've got a checklist of that, it becomes a lot easier then to sort of say, that's not for me, that deal, because it doesn't tick enough boxes. And I think that's a nice way actually to go about investing, is because it shouldn't be emotional. It should be very factual and very, very, not Excel based, but basically essentially looking at hardcore facts to say, this is what I need, therefore if it works and those boxes are ticked, I don't mind what the property looks like, as long as it fits the bill.
Well, you would then, in effect, know that it would work from ticking that tick sheet. I certainly, to all my sources out there, I use a lot of estate agents to source for me. I just give them the checklist and say, this is the property that I need. It's actually interesting. The latest client that actually came over to us at Nudes Property, he sort of said in his initial consultation, he said, I feel that when I'm looking at a property, I go into a suite shop and I just don't know which suite to pick. Like, there's so many of them. They all look so good. They all look so great, but I just don't know which one to pick. And we're now at the stage where he walks into a sweet shop and he knows where to put his hand and which one to pick out. And that is simply because of the property checklist. Yeah.
Before we move on to the next question, so do you give them that checklist and do they physically look through that and send you back tick the boxes and say, I've looked at this property, this is what I found?
So yeah, so with the clients, it's a lot. It's very much mentoring and coaching. So it's up to the clients to be able to work through these properties. So they'll come to me and they'll say, I found this fantastic property in Sheffield, and the first question I ask is, okay, which of the perfect property checklist boxes does it not tick? And are you happy for it not to tick that box? So, for example, if we're looking to put families in there, families tend to stay a lot longer. If a family can grow within a property, you're going to get some longevity out of that. Okay, well, where's the nearest school? If the nearest school's 10 miles away, you're not potentially going to get a family that's going to grow in there and have kids going to the school. So, is that then a deal breaker for that property? It potentially could be.
Do you know what? The really interesting thing about talking to you about this is that when I go to these courses or go to these seminars, when they're talking about these get rich, quick sort of schemes, and when you think about this buy-to-let sort of pathway that you've chosen, it's just very logical and very simple. It's just you have to have the patience to be able to go through it. And I think, like in most things in life, nothing is quick. You have to work at things to become excellent or great at anything, whether it's a sport, whether it's an art, whether it's anything in life. And I think that that's the thing, is that people are getting sucked into this sweet shop syndrome of going in there and trying to get as many sweets from the shop as they can. Well, actually, you're trying to tell people, look, be patient, get things, very, very formalized, get your ducks sort of lined up in a line and follow the recipe. And it's very simple. And I think that's a really powerful thing, really.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And that is really where, at New to Property, we can make a difference. And it is so sweet shop orientated when you're a new investor. There's so much out there, from strategy to properties to deals to this to that. But like you say, once it is completely emotionless, it's a simple tick box exercise. And ultimately, if what we're after, and what we really sort of edge ourselves on at New to Property is that we're helping people get safe, sound, solid investment properties. These properties are not going to, cause you major headaches or issues in the future. They're not going to make you rich overnight, absolutely. But enough of them is going to potentially give you a comfortable future by doing very little.
Yeah. Okay. And then in terms that you said that this is a very passive strategy, but in terms of the management and renovation of the projects, I mean, do you get involved in any of that whatsoever? Are you going out looking for painters, decorators and the rest of it? Or do you just literally give the keys to the management company, tell them what to do and run away?
Yes and no. So I acquire all of the new properties myself, and I go into the new properties myself and turn them around. Now, what I mean by turn them around is some need a full project, a full BRR, so a full refurbishment project on it. Some of them just need a bit of a paint job. But I do go into all of the properties, and I like to do the initial work myself because it just shows me every inch of the property. So then I know. So I'm currently based about 2.5 hours away from my portfolio, and previously used to live abroad, actually over in France. So I manage at a distance. But by knowing every intricate detail and every inch of that property, I know that if something does go wrong that gets brought to my attention, I know what's being talked about, and I know what needs doing to it. So that then allows me to be able to distance manage it for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Now, to take to the work that's involved, like I say, it's either a quick paint job around, depending on whether I've punished myself by doing a renovation job lately or not. But I will do it, and then I hand the keys over to the agent. But what I like to do, and what I have done, is set up my own power team that I have advised my agent to actually utilise and use. So a lot of the power team, as in the plumber, the electrician, the roofer, a plasterer. So a lot of the tradespeople, although of course they can be sourced from the letting agent, I've actually set them up myself, and I have strong relationships with those guys. So I know that who my letting agent is. I'm not leaving anything to chance. I know that my letting agent will contact my plumber, who will go into a property that I know he knows. And if there's any major issues, any problems that I need to know about, both him and the letting agent will let me know.
Yeah. So basically you're lending your power team to the agency, essentially.
That's it. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty good. So every person that goes into that property has already been there or done some work for you on that property.
Or they will know my portfolio, so they'll know what I mean. And a prime example of this is my plumber is now able to help tenants. Let's say I've got a tenant turnover and they have a problem with the boiler. Frequently, he can just help them over the phone and point them in the right direction to do it, which saves me a great deal of money from having a call out or for somebody going to the property, just because he knows it, because he knows my portfolio, and he's able also to be close enough to my letting agent that we all work in unison. My job is a manager. It's not a doer. I don't work on these properties. I manage the team of experts to do what they do best. So
essentially what you're telling people is that you're going into the properties initially, you're getting your hands a little bit dirty to find out exactly where the potential issues could be, getting your power team in to rectify those situations, and then saying, right, here's the team going forward. If they can't solve it, then I'll get in touch with you and help you as well. So you're trying to then make sure that you've outsourced it as much as you can, so you're not involved, but you know about the property if there are any issues.
Yeah, I've outsourced it enough to the right people that I know I've got them in control of it for me to be able to manage efficiently and effectively at a distance without getting involved unless I choose to.
That's pretty impressive, to be fair. And I guess that with the scale as well, you're going to have good relationships with those people because you can offer them business on a relatively regular basis if things do go wrong.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, down to, let's say, gas boiler checks, for example. My plumber has it in his calendar.
Sorry, you lost your sound there. You're back on, Dan.
Yeah, I think I got you back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the agent asking you to sign the forms for the 15th property, probably.
Probably was.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So moving on to I guess our last question for the moment is about for a newbie getting into buy-to-let. What do you think are the biggest risks and the biggest advantages of taking on a buy-to-let property? We've obviously talked a little about the checklist, but what do you think the biggest risks are now?
I would say the biggest risk is taking on a headache because you need to know that not all investment properties are good investment properties. You might speak to your parents, your grandparents, whoever it might be, and back in the day you could buy any property and it would work. There's far more legislation, there's far more rules and regulations now, there's far more hoops to jump through as an investor, and it's not as easy as it used to be, and it's not as easy to make money as it used to be. So I would say the biggest risk is jumping in at the deep end without knowing what you're doing. If you couldn't swim, you wouldn't jump into a lake. So if you don't know how to buy a buy-to-let property, why go and buy one without seeking advice?
Okay, and so are you offering advice to people? Are you helping people on that path? I mean, how do you do that then?
Yeah, so at new to property, we take on clients who are either new or experienced. And when we class as experienced, he's got a couple of properties but have realised that actually for me to be able to scale this or maybe set my business up in the most efficient and effective way, I need to know what I'm doing. So we kind of handhold from the complete end-to-end process of buying a buy-to-let property. So I'm there at every stage on a one-to-one basis with them to advise and mentor. So I'm not doing the work for them, but when they tell me they've selected to buy a property in Gainsborough on the outskirts of Lincoln, I challenge them on the area and ask them about the fundamentals and, is there a train station? Is there a hospital? Where are you going to get your, where are you going to get your tenants from? What tenant pool are we looking for? So yeah, complete end to end, basically, of selecting a patch, looking at the property types, looking at all of the negotiating around it, how to set up the power team, how to get in with the local agents, the estate agents, how to find a letting agent, all that kind of stuff, until we then hand the keys over to the selected letting agent and set and forget the property, and then they can move on to the next one.
So I guess we've obviously been on the call now for about half an hour, so we're going to try and wrap things up because it's meant to be a short, kind of snappy conversation. But I think that from my perspective, Dan, I think that you've done amazingly well to achieve what you've achieved over that period of time. And I think you've chosen a kind of a path which not everybody will choose. And I think that's the beauty of it, is that you're not following everybody else's kind of chasing a dream that everybody else is. You're creating your own dream, and I think that's been a massively important lesson, I guess, for a lot of people, including myself. So I wanted to ask, property number 15. Tell us about it. What's happening with that one? Because I think, did you offer accepted yesterday or today? Was it?
So this property has previously been on the market, and it was sold before I could, because 2.5 hours away from me, so I can only get back, in a certain amount of time, and it sold. So just before we went into lockdown, I noticed it came back on the market, and it seems that whoever was buying it thought that the market's going to crash, buy-to-let is dead, so they pulled out of the deal. So I asked if I could get around it very quickly just before lockdown, which I did, and
Good afternoon, people. How are we doing? Hope you're enjoying the week so far. It's not as great as weather as it was before, but here in sunny Essex, it's not too bad. So this week of wisdom, day 4, I'm delighted to be sharing the stage with somebody who I massively admire, respect for what he does. His name is Dan Coachafer. He is an absolute legend. In my opinion, he's created his own path, which is very different from a lot of people in the industry.